Travis Holmes from the Duval Dive podcast, Fans First Sports Network, and BigCatCountry.com, here with your Jacksonville Jaguars weekend update. For those who may have missed the recent reporting via Travis D Holmes of BigCatCountry.com, the Jacksonville Jaguars are currently the lone remaining team who have yet to sign any free agents from their 2024 NFL roster. With the Cleveland Browns re-signing linebacker Devin Bush to a one-year deal, the Jaguars are now the sole remaining team not to sign a departing unrestricted free agent from their 2024 roster. And while that may seem like a huge thing, overall it kind of is should be at least somewhat expected, seeing that the Jacksonville Jaguars previous administration had built a roster that was sub 500 under Trent Baalke and under Doug Peterson. So while that is a major thing, because you normally don't want to be the only team to not have signed someone from the previous roster, let's also be aware that the Jacksonville Jaguars did extend left tackle Walker Little during the 2024 season. He would have become an unrestricted free agent had they not done that. So while, again, it is a big thing to be the only team not to sign some of your guys, it's quite possible that this new front office structure with Tony Baselli, with Liam Cohen, with James Gladstone simply wants to build from the draft, as they keep telling us they do. And more importantly, that they just thought that why spend free agent dollars on guys who have helped us get to under 500 when I can just go with the draft. This thing I say I want to build with the draft. This is my opportunity to do just that. So at the end of all of it, it's not a huge thing, but it's just something that's kind of on the radar because someone reported it, and that was becoming a conversation, I guess. Sorry, guys. But there is a conversation that is worth having with the Jacksonville Jaguars, not retaining any of these guys from the former administration. There is a previous example that didn't go the way of most Jaguar fans would have liked it to go. Back in the 2021 NFL season under Urban Meyer and Trent Baalke, the Jacksonville Jaguars did at that time move on from now all-pro linebacker Quincy Williams with the New York Jets. We know he's an all-pro now. At the time, he was just a 2019 draft pick from the Jaguars who was struggling with injuries for a few seasons and just couldn't find a way to kind of get his footing in the NFL. We end up waiving him. We end up cutting him from the team, and he ended up getting claimed off waivers by the Jets. He found his footing. He's got healthy, and ended up putting together a pretty solid, again, all-pro season. He was last an all-pro back in the 2023 season with the Jets, and kind of a cog in their defense, been extended and such. We can also make the similar argument for, not to this level, but again, Clavon Chason. I know the sack guru, the sack master, everyone. You're thinking about that beach training video that makes us all laugh. But, Clavon Chason is that guy. He was truly that dude once the Las Vegas Raiders placed him off the practice squad in, I believe it was October for their team. He ends up collecting 5 sacks, multiple pass defense, a forced fumble, and an interception while playing as their designated pass rusher. He only played just over 500 snaps overall with that team and got 32 tackles, again, 5 sacks and multiple pass defense and such with that team. And he did none of that with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there has to be a conversation around whether or not these guys were put into the best positions, whether or not these guys are being developed by that previous coaching staff who is no longer here, and whether or not they were just put into different schemes that's just not going to work for their individual skill sets. Like, the last thing you want to do for a Jacksonville Jaguars organization when you're rebuilding is to move on from a guy simply because you already moved on from the coaching who are developing that individual person. So kind of just thought it was a good situation to kind of take a look at the individuals that were released from the team or that simply weren't re-signed with the team, to kind of figure out, are there any guys like an Alan Lazard? Are there any guys like a Calais Campbell? Are there any guys like a Shaq Griffin? Again, he played pretty well for the Minnesota Vikings just this past season, and the Brian Flores. Like, are there any of these guys in this group of 14 overall free agents, if you're counting the the restricted free agents also from the Jacksonville Jaguars, that maybe the team should have considered holding on to a little bit longer? So obviously, Mac Jones was an unrestricted free agent. He ended up signing a two-year deal with the San Francisco 49ers. The Jacksonville Jaguars have Trevor Lawrence, obviously, but as far as a backup quarterback situation, that's going to likely come via the draft, unless they end up going with Nick Mullins throughout this season. So we'll kind of see what that looks like. Brandon Scherf is an unrestricted free agent. He's the right guard for the Jacksonville Jaguars for the past few seasons. There was some conversation about whether or not he was going to retire. So I don't feel any kind of way about that, especially with seeing how he kind of struggled in run blocking and such. Offensive guard Blake Hance. He's also an unrestricted free agent who signed a 1-year contract with the Tennessee Titans, reportedly. Again, if you're talking about the depth of the Jacksonville Jaguars roster at this current moment in time for the offensive guard position, I think they're in a pretty solid spot currently, and they're probably going to draft one, if not multiple guys up front on that on the offensive line, whether you're counting the guard or the tackle situation, maybe even multiple centers. We'll see what that looks like with, Luke Fortner still likely to be competing this offseason. But nevertheless, none of those guys make me ring the fire alarm as far as these are going to be guys who are going to be all pros in the future. Again, Brandon Scherf is, what is he, like 35, 36 years old at this point? I think we kind of know who those guys are at least. But Cole Van Lannon did have the original round tender placed on him. So if the Jacksonville Jets, so he's allowed to negotiate with other teams. But the Jaguars have the right of first refusal. They are able to then match the contract for him if another team comes to terms with him. But if they choose to allow him to just go to that other team, the Jaguars would then regain a 6th-round pick from that team. So we'll see what happens with that. Technically speaking, the Jaguars haven't lost the ability to sign him because, again, he is a restricted free agent, but we'll see where that lands. Next up is running back D'Ernest Johnson, who's also an unrestricted free agent. Now, I personally have my feelings on this one, and I know folks may not necessarily agree, but I always thought D'Ernest Johnson deserved a better opportunity to truly start here, like get significant carries. And I've always thought that since he had his great season in Cleveland, the first time that Nick Chubb got injured. And for whatever reason, the Jaguars just thought, hey, we want to go with Travis Etienne. We want to go with Tank Bixby. I fully understand all of it, but nevertheless, I thought D'Ernest Johnson was the best pass protecting back that we have on this roster. He was a good receiver out of the backfield, and I just didn't think he ever got enough opportunities to actually run the ball with this struggling offensive line. Also, the fact of the matter is he struggled to run behind a line that the other two running backs also struggled to run behind because they were always being hit behind the line of scrimmage, at a league low rate, yards before contact. So unfortunately, I think he might be one of those guys who may be able to land in a better blocking situation. And Jaguar fans might be like, I wish we would have held on to that guy. Maybe he might have been a little bit better. But that's just me personally, especially because I love his pass blocking chops. Folks missed the fact probably that Luke Fortner signed a $20 million contract with the San Francisco 49ers, man. That was an interesting one. I believe it was a 3-year deal for $20.25 million with the San Francisco 49ers. So congratulations, Luke. He's going to make a great blocking tight end for them. I mean, maybe give them a little bit in the passing game, but overall, as a Jacksonville Jaguars organization, you can't be willing to spend that sort of money on, for the most part, exclusively a blocking tight end. And then we have Josiah DeGuara, who came over from the Green Bay Packers in this past season. He is still an unrestricted free agent and is currently unsigned, at least at this time. So we will see how that lands. Wide receiver Tim Jones is a restricted free agent. However, he was signed to a 1-year deal with the Minnesota Vikings. The Jaguars decided not to match that contract. So maybe he will be a solid special teams ace for them, or maybe they have plans for him in the wide receiver room. We will see. But defensive tackle Jeremiah Ledbetter was an unrestricted free agent who was signed to a 1-year maximum $2 million deal with the New York Giants. Like Ledbetter has played well. And I really do hope folks don't give him smoke for going to the Giants or wherever he lands, basically, because that's one of those guys who I think is a really good guy overall. He's done nothing but play above. I mean, he's outkicked the coverage in very many ways. You know what I mean? And the Jacksonville Jaguars, while they have Mason Smith, while they have goodness gracious. Jordan Jefferson. Like they have a few options as far as the defensive front is concerned, as far as their depth. They're more likely than not going to also draft another guy. So it made total sense to move on from him and not put in more free agent dollars into, an older defensive line candidate. But nevertheless, I believe he might be one of those guys who are also going to be able to put up some solid numbers, or maybe not like league leading numbers or anything along those lines, but he's going to be a contributor and a nice role player for another team. So congratulations to him on that. Esezi Otomewo was an exclusive rights free agent and was signed to a 1-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Uh, Defensive end Deshaun Dixon is an exclusive rights free agent who is currently unsigned after his injury last season. Caleb Johnson, linebacker, was also an unrestricted free agent, and linebacker Joe Gillis Harris is an exclusive rights free agent. All of those, again, are currently unsigned. The bigger one, if you're talking specifically free agents, is safety Andre Cisco. That's the one that has Jaguar fans seemingly split in this conversation. He was an unrestricted free agent and was allowed to explore his options. And he signed to a 1-year, $10 million deal with the New York Jets. Now he's going to be in that Aaron Glenn defense with surrounded around a lot of good pass rushers, a lot of good talents in that secondary. And that's going to be one of those ones that I'm like, you got a defensive head coach who's coaching this dude up and maybe able to finally get some good development on tape and to kind of get in his ear. That's one of those ones that I got questions on. Like maybe Andre Cisco's going to be one of those ones that folks look back and like, dang it, I knew he was good. He was solid. Like he wasn't able to get on the field earlier in Urban's tenure, but he was solid under Mike Caldwell, and he was able to kind of put it together. And then all of a sudden, it just fell off. The wheels fell off in Ryan Nielsen's defense because everyone struggled. Linebacker coverage struggled, safety, cornerback coverage. The defensive line wasn't able to get any pressure, etc. All of it. So it's kind of like, ooh, that Andre Cisco being allowed to kind of go elsewhere on a 1-year deal. Ooh, that's one of those ones that I got questions on. That it's quite possible that the Jaguars might look back on this thing and say, maybe we should have held on to Cisco just a little bit longer. I just do hope that that's not the case because, again, I do support this team. I cover this team, but I'm also a fan of this team. So it's just a little bit like, okay, we'll see what happens there. But okay. The team also released Evan Ingram, traded Christian Kirk, released Devin Duvernay, and released Ronald Darby along with Josh Reynolds, wide receiver. And those are some pretty big releases and or trades overall. I mean, I think we already kind of know how folks feel about the majority of those. Evan Ingram ends up signing a 2-year deal with the Denver Broncos. Christian Kirk's traded to the Houston Texans for a 2026 7th-round pick. Devin Duvernay signs a 1-year deal with the Chicago Bears, and Ronald Darby ends up going on a 1-year deal to the Houston Texans. And frankly, any of those guys might land on their feet in way better situations and honestly have much better, play on the field than folks kind of expect. I mean, at the end of the day, Christian Kirk had hit career numbers for him with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if not for those injuries, he probably, he might still be here, frankly. I know the Jacksonville Jaguars were interested in, or at least were rumored to have him on the trade block with the Pittsburgh Steelers, the week before his injury in the 2024 season. And that obviously that did happen. So I can't say that wouldn't have happened or not, but you never know what happens with trades. At the end of the day, Christian Kirk was doing well then. He was doing well in the 2023 season before getting injured. And it's quite possible that if he can just stay healthy in that Houston Texans offense, he may be able to do well in that offense. That's going to be pretty limited on other receiving options. Also, with Tank Dell also unlikely to play this upcoming season. Devin Duvernay is going to be in that Chicago Bears offense on a 1-year deal. Now, he might be primarily a special teams player because that's kind of what he was for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's honestly pretty similar to a Jamison Williamson, who, Ben Johnson comes from Detroit. He knows how to have those clear out guys and how to use those clear out guys in that role. And Devin Duvernay is probably similar to that, maybe even similar to De'Ami Brown for the Jaguars, which makes me kind of curious why the Jaguars didn't just hold on to Devin Duvernay instead of, $3 million a year instead of going to De'Ami Brown for the $10 million. So Again, he's a little bit younger. Devin Duvernay is 27 versus 25 for Dyami. So I don't know if it was that or it was just proof of concept. They seen Dyami Brown run those screen passes and also be a little bit explosive more recently than we've seen from Devin Duvernay. It could have been as simple as that. Who knows? But I'm going to kind of keep an eye on that because I think that that's one of those ones that they could land on his feet in the right situation and have folks wishing, dang it, I wish we would have held on to him. So it's just one of those things. Again, you want to just kind of keep an eye on. And finally, Ronald Darby. He had a pretty solid season with the Baltimore Ravens before being signed in Jacksonville. And just like I spoke on with Andre Cisco, he kind of the wheels fell off in this Jacksonville Jaguars secondary, but the wheels fell off for everyone. Again, pass rush, linebackers, secondary, etc. So if everyone struggled, then the secondary is going to struggle right along with them. So at the end of all of that, I can see him having a bounce back season, and I don't know if it's going to be a top of the league season where it's like an all pro situation like Quincy, but nevertheless, it could absolutely be a solid role playing option, and we'll see what happens with that guy. So I don't know. So we'll just have to keep an eye on these guys. But at the end of all of it, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have a few candidates who might potentially make folks wish. Dang it. I wish we would have held on to that guy. I know it was a regime change. I know they wanted to do things differently, but maybe holding on to a Pro Bowl tight end might have been a pretty solid plan. Maybe holding on to a very good slot receiver in Christian Kirk might have been smart. Maybe holding on to a safety whose arrow is pointing up, but who had a down season when everyone around him had a down season might have been a good idea. I don't know. The Houston Texans seem to believe it was going to be a good idea. They've signed Cam Robinson. They traded for Christian Kirk and they signed Ronald Darby. That's three people who they played 2 times a year for multiple of the past years that they thought maybe they weren't being developed enough. Maybe they weren't playing well in those individual coaches' schemes. Let's bring those guys in. I think they'll be solid additions to our team. Hopefully they're wrong because again, we don't like the Texans, but if they're right, it's not a hard leap to say like maybe they thought these coaches were bad because guess what? These coaches also aren't here anymore. So at some level, we all thought they weren't good either. I don't know where to land with that, but I do think it's going to be very interesting to see how this thing goes in this upcoming season, how well the Jacksonville Jaguars draft, how well they're going to be able to develop these guys into the system. But yeah, no real strong takes on it. I'm just kind of going to keep an eye on it and like you guys, still be rooting for the team and say go Duval. But what are your thoughts? How do you feel about the Jaguars roster subtractions overall? How do you feel about the additions they've made so far? Let us know in the comments. Do you think are there any of these players that they're going to regret? Are there any that you're already regretting before you even see what the roster looks like? Let us know. If you're listening to us on the YouTube, like and subscribe, of course, please. If you're listening to us on whatever your podcatcher is, your favorite podcatcher is, please rate and review us and catch this thing while it's free. And as always, let us know what you guys want to talk about in the comments. So we appreciate you guys. We love you guys. And we will hit you up on this week's Wednesday Duval Dive podcast.